is not about what you think should happen, but what you think will happen. And I want to know if you're an optimist or a pessimist when it comes to climate change and coronavirus. So I think the optimistic take is that coronavirus, one, has shown the limits of neoliberalism. We've really seen the damage that it does to have a state with no capacity to respond to crises. It also has, brought about, I would hope, an awareness that we as a society need to look at future risks and deal with them in the present instead of putting them off, because I think many people will come to recognize that we could have foreseen a pandemic and the government didn't prepare because, our politics is structured to only really consider short-term problems. The pessimist, though, says that we're going to have a massive recession. What often happens in times of economic crises is that governments say, we can't afford the luxury of discussing green economies and climate change. What we need to do is get the economy moving as quickly as possible, jobs, jobs, jobs. And that means that we can't afford to, tax heavily emissions. We can't afford to have a green transition at this point in time because the short-term requirements, which are more urgent, more electorally urgent, again, is growth. So, I mean, where do you sit on those two, on the end of that spectrum?
Well, I think both of those are plausible positions. I don't think they need necessarily evolve passively. We have a role in this, in determining what happens politically. That is what we're supposed to do. That is in a way what democracies live off, is people's willingness to step up and say, this is what we want and we don't want that. So, let's not just sit back and see what happens. Let's mobilize for the change we want. But of course, there's a real danger. There's a real danger that, they'll just try to reinvent the bad old dirty economy as quickly as they possibly can. But, I think this could be a real moment of change where that whole story, oh, we can't act, governments are really weak and powerless, there's very little we can do, people would never take it. That story is just completely fallen apart. Just to take one example, for years now, we've been told, oh, what a pity about homelessness. We would love everyone to have a home, but it just can't be done. It's a real shame. And, we, the government, are trying really hard, but, the homeless will always be with us. Suddenly, pandemic hits, bang, everyone should be housed instantly. We need to find homes for everybody because otherwise they'll spread disease. I said, oh, so it can be done. Well, so all those years when you were telling us it couldn't be done, you were lying to us. It was complete bollocks. And we see that with issue after issue, a whole series of issues where they say it couldn't be done. We can't break austerity. There's no alternative. This is the only way to do. Governments can't borrow beyond a certain point. We just can't do it. It's impossible. Suddenly it's possible. They think, okay, if it's possible for the pandemic, it is possible for all the other issues that we face. And we must use that knowledge again and again and again. And we must constantly confront governments with it, saying, you said it couldn't be done, but when you needed to, you did it. It's not a question of economics. It's not a question of physics. It's a question of political will. And it's us, through mobilizing, who must put the government in a position where it has no choice but to exercise that political will to change society for the better.
I'm going to bring in JSol now, who has tweeted on the hashtag TiskiSour. George speaks so much sense and is incredibly eloquent. Thank you very much for getting him on. What books would he recommend to read during lockdown?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Well, I've been reading. I've actually been reading about soil ecology. My lockdown project is to learn as much as I possibly can. So I've been reading some very boring textbooks on soil ecology. But, relevant to this debate, Kate Raworth's Donut Economics, is a really key text. I'm sure many of your viewers have already read it. I think there's, a huge, very interesting online literature developing very rapidly in response to the pandemic. And every day now, I'm coming across really fascinating stuff. On various websites, whether it's The Conversation or whether it's Novara Media, or, there's a huge amount of stuff which is tracking our evolving conversation. And in a way, it makes a lot of what we were discussing before almost irrelevant. I mean, obviously it's an underpinning, but it gives us a sort of chance to really rethink things in an even more radical way than we were doing before. I mean, I'm looking at what I was writing before this, and it was all sort of hopeful. Well, I don't think we need to be hopeful anymore. We can see that actually massive change can just happen just like that. We can turn economies around in a sixpence if we need to. So it's almost as if we now need a completely new literature to say we're past the age of hope. We're now in the hope in the era of just doing it. And here's what we can just do. Let's just do it, because governments have proven that it can be done when it needs to be.